All right, welcome everybody to the North Carolina VIPER Radio Training 2022 update. My name is Matt McMahon. I'm a disaster and communications specialist with the Eastern Healthcare Preparedness Coalition, and we're pleased to offer this update to you. On the screen you'll notice a variety of agencies, North Carolina Emergency Management, specifically ESF2 section, North Carolina Office of EMS, ESF 8, and the State Highway Patrol VIPER section, TSU, all had input in looking over the information in this presentation to ensure its accuracy. So what we're going to cover, the presentation is going to last hopefully about an hour. And we're going to talk about some of the new things that are coming to VIPER and some of the updates that are needing to occur. And we're going to talk about the most common equipment that's used on the system. We're going to talk about a statewide template that's new, and just generally best practices, troubleshooting, and what the future looks like. Some supplemental training that may be beneficial to everybody is we're going to include a 30-minute blocks on some of the most common discipline concerns. So we'll do one for healthcare, hospitals, mainly relate how radios and VIPER works for the healthcare discipline. We'll do one for aviation, so air crews, pilots, and anything in the aviation section can reference that and how VIPER works for them. And we'll do a module for SAR, search and rescue, auxiliary communications, and we'll probably do combine a module that is for communication resource list, ESF2 flow, so if you need help or how to report information, and of course documentation. And the release dates of those will be announced coming soon. All right, disclaimer. Everything in this presentation is being provided by EHPC. We are not endorsing or sponsoring any particular piece of equipment. We are just sharing facts and figures, and we cannot possibly go over every piece of equipment that is used on the system in detail. So we are hitting the most common equipment. VIPER is a Motorola P25 Phase 1 FDMA trunked radio system as of today. So any mention of a particular vendor, in this case Motorola, does not necessarily mean we're endorsing them, but it is a Motorola system, and a majority of the radios on the system are Motorola. That being said, VIPER does have a VIPER approved radio list on what radios are allowed on the system and are compatible, and that list changes usually yearly, sometimes more, depending upon the needs of the radios. The pictures in the training slides are the most common platforms and are open source pictures. And if you have different types of equipment, please refer to your specific hardware manual for additional information. All right, real quick, why do we use radios? And the answer is pretty simple. One is we don't have to be in competition with the general public when we use our radio systems. Most of them are independent from third-party infrastructure. So if connectivity is lost, if the internet goes down, things of that nature, or cellular phones do not work, then they continue to work. And also it's a interoperable platform among many agencies that we use at unplanned or planned events and day-to-day operations. Generally, they're easy to use, especially during times of high stress. You know, you pick the channel you want, you push the talk button, and you send your traffic. You don't have to worry about dialing phone numbers and things of that nature. And of course, the ruggedness and of public safety gears is far out exceeds the consumer grade gear. So whether it's intrinsically safe or waterproof, the equipment is hardened to last in the environments that we use them in. All right, so the VIPER system, what is it? What is it? What does it stand for? So most states have a statewide radio system that have some type of acronym. For us, North Carolina, it is VIPER, which stands for the Voice Interoperability Plan for Emergency Responders. And it is North Carolina's interoperable communication platform that extends across the entire state, and all public safety, medical and emergency response agencies have access to, and works very well and is virtually seamless. We do have a lot to be proud of in North Carolina. We are one of the largest statewide trunk radio systems in the United States, and one of only a few that does not charge subscriber fees to use the system monthly. And that's something to really be proud of here. All right, so some short history. Starting in 1994, people started looking to see what type of interoperable capabilities North Carolina had, and 95 kind of identified some of those gaps and deficiencies. 1999, State Highway Patrol directed a plan to develop what we have now as the VIPER system. And of course, 2001 terrorist attacks, World Trade Center occurred September 11th, and that brought a whole new light into interoperable communications. So some of the major things: Hurricane Katrina, Sandy, September 11th, and there's some notable ones there that really showed the gaps in interoperable communications. 2003, construction officially began, and in 21-22, it was forecasted 100% of the infrastructure would be completed. So how does VIPER work? So if we look at this map on the right-hand side, we can see a map, very strategic level of where some of the radio sites are located across the state. And the easiest way for someone to think about how this works is very similar to a cellular network. So as you pick up your phone and you make a voice call, you roam between towers as you travel, and that's basically how it works with VIPER. It functions much like a cellular telephone, but looks like a radio. So what you see is a big spider web of connectivity across all these sites in the state. And what these sites are all, on towers, they have repeated voice channels and a control channel that makes up each site. We'll talk more about that. And the coverage varies from site to site based upon how high it is and the terrain around it. So some quick system numbers. Of course, this was of January 2021. It's important to note these figures are dynamic and they increase daily. So you'll see these numbers have changed since the design of this PowerPoint. So this is just general information. When we wrote this, 223 sites were on the air with a plan of 241 for the system to be fully built out. And here's some other numbers you can look at. The big one here, 447 communication centers were directly tied into the system. And monthly, 8.5 million push-to-talks. So that's somebody pushing the button on the radio to talk on it. That's 8.5 million times a month that occurred. So this is a huge system, and it's very impressive on how it works. And the pictures on the right, you see a radio tower. This is generally what a lot of the towers look like. And you'll see these microwave dishes on the side. Some of them look different than this, but overall, this is the general idea. All right, so one important thing to know is what we call the VIPER point of contact. And this is how the command and control, or span of control, if you want to call it that, is maintained across the state. So each discipline in the state, that's a state agency, has a VIPER point of contact assigned. So whether you're Office of EMS, if you are public health, each one of those agencies has a point of contact. At the county level, at the local emergency services, each county has a VIPER point of contact. Most oftentimes that's the county emergency manager. It can be the sheriff or any other designee. But the way it works is that VIPER point of contact maintains the current record of what's in the database that's under her watch, his or her watch, and certifies that yearly with the state. So the way it works is the agency works with the VIPER point of contact, and the VIPER point of contact in turn works with the TSU. And then it follows back the other direction. So when information comes out from the state, it's sent to all the VIPER point of contacts and then down to the agencies. So if you have to put new IDs, new radios on the system, if you've lost a radio, if you need to deactivate IDs, it's important to work through your VIPER point of contact. If you do not know who that point of contact is, you can reach out to the TSU, to the NOC, and I'm sure they can help you with that. All right, next. So how does trunking work? What's all about trunking? And the simple way to look at it is it's a computer-aided radio network that uses resources wisely. So this is a typical site that you see on the right-hand side here, and this is a rather small site, but this looks like probably a 5-channel site. And here's a picture of a tower. And so what a radio has a unique ID, almost like a phone number in it. And it talks to the radio system, which in turn talks to a controller. And based upon your permission and what you're trying to do, you are assigned a specific resource to accomplish your task. So handshakes are completed regularly. So anytime you turn the radio on, turn it off, you switch channels, you hit the transmit button, all those things communicate with the system, and there's record of that. Generally, talk permit tones, and we'll cover that. Those are good, and denials, or what we call bonks, are bad. And we'll let you hear what those sound like. All right, so why is VIPER unique? One of the reasons is the way the backhaul system is designed. So we looked at that map with all those sites across the state. These microwave dishes connect those sites from one site to the other in that big spider web of connectivity. So what makes VIPER unique is that all that connectivity is above the ground in a point-to-point format. So a lot of the failures that we have, whether it's from a vendor digging up or a contractor digging up a fiber optic line or a flooding event where we have a large-scale flood, what makes VIPER very resilient is the microwave connectivity that connects all of the sites together. That being said, it's not without its own downfalls. So in extreme wind circumstances, sometimes we see microwave dishes blown off path and need to be corrected. But overall, if we look at the last 10 years, VIPER has been very resilient, both from a technical standpoint, hardware related, and also the personnel that oversee the system. Just tremendous job. It's also independent from third-party transport reliance, so we're not relying on a vendor to move any of this data across the state from site to site. It's all done internal. Coverage for the most part is good. In the eastern part of the state, it's outstanding. And the way they look at coverage, this is an older map from 2004, but you know, when trunked radio systems are designed, for the most part, they're designed for street level coverage, which means if I have a portable radio in the middle of a street, what does the coverage look like? Generally, with trunk systems, when they design the system, they're not designed to penetrate deep into buildings, subterranean, below grade, things of that nature. So that's why we add things called BDAs, or bidirectional amplifiers. And one new fact is the new fire code mandates that new construction is evaluated to ensure the local public radio safety systems are satisfactory inside the building. And if they're not, then the building owner has to install a BDA. That also goes with existing construction. When a remodel is done over certain parameters, they have to have an RF study done of the building as well. There is some coverage across state lines. If you go into Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, you will have some coverage across the state line a little ways. But that's about it. One important thing to talk about is the way talk groups are restricted. So the easiest way to look at this, if you are a local agency, most of the time there is not a need for you to communicate outside your response area, if that's what you want to call it. The example here is where we have Pitt County highlighted, and the example will use a local fire department talk group. Is there really a need for that talk group to be used in Charlotte on the other side of the state? And the answer is no. That's why we have other types of talk groups and interoperable talk groups. So the general rule of thumb is they'll go about 2 sites away, and then they are restricted. So the audio will not pass further than that, and that's where you would move over to a more interoperable type talk group. And the reason for that is because anytime we move radio traffic across the state between sites, we have to, it requires resources, and we don't want to do that for every single talk group. So if somebody's traveling to the other side of the state and they want to listen to their home operations on dispatch, you know, that's what that is trying to prevent. It is worth noting anything in the mandatory VIPER template SOG, which we will cover, is considered statewide coverage. So all the way from Murphy to Manio, you can use those talk groups across the state. All right, the interoperability continuum. Probably a lot of folks have seen this. This is how we grade ourselves when it comes to all the different forms of communication items. You know, governance, what SOPs we have, technology, training and exercise. So here specifically we're talking about VIPER, which is in the technology section. And if you notice, everything on the left-hand side is low, which means we're not doing very well. Everything on the right is pretty high. So we have a standards-based shared radio system in North Carolina, VIPER. We are on the high end of that. We've done an outstanding job. So that, and this is a good grade book, even at your local agency level. If you want to say, hey, where do we rank up on this, you can look at all these categories and self-assess yourself. All right, conventional, we're going to really briefly just talk about really 2 different types of radio systems out there, conventional and a trunk system. So conventional is probably what we are used to for many years, state fire, state EMS. we either had a simplex channel, or perhaps your county had a repeated channel, and it was on VHF, and very simple. It's basically a repeater pair. Only one user can talk on it at a time, and obviously if we increase capacity, we'd have to add new channels. This was the mainstay of communications for many years, and it's still around, but where we progress to is really trunking. And what trunking is, it's the sharing of resources among many users. And instead of a specific channel, what we have is called a talk group, which is just a virtual channel. And it's a responsible use of resources. Each agency is not required to run and maintain their own communication system. Example of that is, here in this picture, this is the old days. We have a conventional radio, and let's say each fire or EMS, law enforcement, had their own radio repeater, their own channel. If you looked at how much that radio was actually used in a 24-hour period, it was very slim. I'm probably willing to say most of the time less than 10%. But if you look at the trunked radio theory, and this is how phones were designed for many years, is that we have one big resource here, and we use the old bank teller theory. So everybody's in line right at the bank, and as soon as a teller comes open, you step up to the teller and you complete your objective. So that's how trunking works. We have this big resource, and as you come up to it, you use whatever resource is available. Where as opposed to over here, everybody had their own resource. And so this is a much wiser use of resources and efficient. And with VIPER's case, each agency does not have to maintain their own radio system, which is a big benefit. All right, so one of these at each site, what we have is a control channel, what we call a control channel, and also voice channels. And a control channel sits there and transmits all the time, and basically it's the traffic director. And as your radio, you turn your radio on, you turn it off, you switch channels, you hit the transmit button. All those things the control channel is listening for. So this is what a control channel sounds like, and hopefully it's not too loud on your speakers. Pretty interesting, huh? You can't make a whole lot out of that. It's because it's digital. And but that is what a control channel sounds like all the time. So here's a picture of this is what the system back end looks like, and this is just one flavor of watching the traffic. But on the right hand side, this is a list of all the activity where somebody has keyed up a radio of some kind. And in the middle here we have a list of here's the control channel, and these are the voice channels. So think of each one of these as a radio, at the radio site. And the control channel sitting there listening all the time for any of that traffic we talked about. So if you watch what happens when somebody keys up, you'll see it on the right hand side. All right, so two people keyed up there. They're on this channel, right? They're talking. They've let go of the button. And now, let's see. So now he's on this channel. And so what we have here is basically as people talk, the system assigns the appropriate resource to it. The good part is the end user doesn't see any of this. It's all seamless. But each one of these is a radio, and as somebody keys up, then it's assigning the appropriate resource. So very interesting how trunking works, and a lot goes on in the background that people don't see. So people talk about repeaters all the time, and a repeater is nothing more than a relay. Okay, so as a radio is trying to communicate with a radio on the other side of the mountain, well, direct there's something in the way, the big mountain in the way. So that's why we put repeaters in high locations, add power to them, and now the repeater hears on one frequency and transmits on another. So we've been using this technology for years, and the main goal is to increase the coverage area. As opposed to, this is direct, and this is something for you to take away from this presentation, is the term direct and talk around, which is simplex communications. And what that means is it's direct from radio to radio. Okay, there's no infrastructure in the middle here. So, generally, we always say line of sight communications. So especially from VHF all the way up to 700-800 megahertz, generally this is line of sight communications. All right, we'll talk about some modulation techniques. The first one is analog, and everybody probably already knows what this sounds like. So whether you listen to AM/FM radio, analog communication is exactly what it sounds like. So here it is.
Severe gale 9 litre in west. Rain, fog patches, moderate, occasionally very poor. And that's the end of the shipping forecast. Now on to a look at the general weather.
Yeah, so you can clearly understand what that is and what's being said. Now with digital communications, things are a little different. So what happens is we speak into a microphone that then gets converted into a digital format, goes across digital, and then gets converted back into analog where we can understand it. So if you were to listen to the same communication in digital, this is what it would sound like. So obviously that's a lot harder to make out because it's in digital. So that gives you an idea of what that sounds like. All right, we're going to start talking about the how the radios are designed with talk groups and zones. We talked about that talk groups are virtual channels, and most of the time we take talk groups and put them in a list, and that list then forms the zone. So here we have 16 talk groups or channels, and they're in the air ops zone. Okay. On average, most of the radios will hold over 1,000 channels. The multi-band radios will sometimes hold 3,000 or more, which is pretty incredible. And on average, most of the radios will at least hold 50 zones, and 90% of the time zones are divided into groups of 16. And it has to relate to how the channel knob functions. So that's the most common way to set the radios up. All right, so something that's new is this was adopted in March of 2021. The Statewide Interoperable Executive Committee made a SOG, that is the VIPER statewide required template. And we're going to go through that template here real quick. And it is included in this presentation, and we will include a link to it in the training. And what this did is it provided some guidance on updated channels, modifications of some of the existing ones, and deletion of others. We added some guidance on encryption. So if your agency is wishing to add encryption, how do you do that? Programming authority, who has the authority to program, and how do we plan on using state event talk groups. All right, so the first one, we'll talk about state event talk groups. For many years we only had the alpha through hotel talk groups. We have since added the India through Tango, which gives us up to 80 talk groups for state events. And I want to make sure that it's clear that, you don't get on any of these talk groups and just start using them. They all have to be coordinated through the 24-hour watch, which is the state emergency operations center. They maintain a list of who is using these talk groups and for what type of event. Please do not pick it and just use it. You may interfere with somebody who's performing life-saving, or a critical operation. All of these talk groups do have statewide coverage, and feel free to review the SOG for more information on those. All right, domestic preparedness region, what we call DIPER talk groups. At one time we had 90 of these. We have condensed these down now into 10 talk groups per zone. So here we have the Eastern, Central, and Western. And here are your points of contact for each one of those. These also have to be reserved. Please do not get on these and use these without permission. The main purpose of these talk groups were kind of designed for planned events, regional type talk groups. So if you're having a parade, some type of community event that is extending beyond your local talk group's capability, this is your next logical solution, is a DIPER talk group. All right, North Carolina Emergency Management statewide talk groups. You'll recognize some of these. Some new ones, of course, we always had statewide call, and we see the branch offices or the RCCs, but the big difference here is the landing zone or LZ talk groups. And the two biggest takeaways from this is we have added the LZ Piedmont section, which is what you see in gray right here. And the other takeaway is we've added a second talk group to each zone. So there's LZ 1 and 2 for each zone. And why we're talking about this, if you are an agency that's in this LZ Piedmont section, it's very important because this will be new for you. But between air and all the ground personnel, you need to make sure that you coordinate the transition over to this pretty seamlessly. So what we don't want is an aircraft on LZ Piedmont 1 and the ground personnel on LZ Central from the old template. So this is very important to kind of make sure we're coordinated with this. The other thing is LZ talk groups are really not made for doing flight following or patient reporting. So every hospital has their own VMN talk group to provide patient reports. The LZ talk groups are made for air-to-ground communications as it relates to landing zones, specifically scene runs. So, in the event all options fail, you use whatever option is open and you do what you need to do. But generally, we should not be doing this stuff on the LZ channel. All right, RCCs stands for Regional Coordination Centers. This is the map of the RCCs. Here is the East, Central, and West. And the important thing here to know, none of these talk groups for the most part have changed, but we call them branch offices for day-to-day work, but in disasters, they're really the Regional Coordination Center. So it's important to know the communication flow. It starts from the locals, it progresses to the county level, then progresses to the RCC, and then progresses to the EOC. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And what this is span of control. What we don't want is 100 counties trying to reach out to the EOC to do resource requests, things of that nature. So this is your logical path of communication guidance, during disasters. All right, air operations talk groups. These have been added to the basic statewide template, and it's designed for air operations, and this could be for air-to-air, air-to-ground, whatever's needed. These are not open access. Just don't get on them and talk on them. Must be coordinated through 24-hour watch. And a good example of these talk groups would be we get a Cat 2-3 hurricane, and the HART team, Coast Guard, other resources are doing rescues. You may be directed to go to one of these talk groups to work with aircraft to accomplish a task. So that's what it's for. And then we added some conventional direct national public safety, which is what's in your NIFOG. These are air-to-ground talk groups. So, if you go to California on an EMAC mission, you very well should be able to use some of these solutions to communicate with aircraft as long as they have it. All right, NC Highway Patrol talk groups, not a whole lot's changed there. You can see the troops and the mutual aid channel and the common 2 for each troop. That's basically unchanged from before. All right, NPS, National Public Safety, your NIFOG, and I have a picture up here that is the older version, 1.6. The newest one is 2.0, so feel free to download that. And you can also download the app for it. And the takeaway here is no matter what band radio you have, you want the stuff in this manual or guidebook loaded into your radio. So part of the statewide template has already done that, and so all of your interoperable channels here have been loaded and are part of that template. Okay, law enforcement talk groups. This is pretty important. This has been added for law enforcement and mainly for a secure area to operate. So the biggest thing is we get folks that ask, hey, can we add this to our radio template? And the answer is, if you are not law enforcement operations, then the answer is no. This is for law enforcement. And in here, there are some talk groups that are in the clear, and then you can see here there is DES, AES, and various forms of encryption, and this all can be found inside the SOG. And you must request permission to load and access these talk groups and the interoperable keys that are designated for them. And we'll talk more about that. We are pretty proud North Carolina is really only a handful of states have a interoperable encryption plan, and we have one in North Carolina. It was written, I believe, in 2020, and it covers basically how we're going to handle encryption in North Carolina and maintain interoperability at the local, state, and national level. And this document is available for agencies that are wishing to do that. The biggest takeaway is, if you are planning encryption, is to seek some assistance from the point of contact for the state before you do so. Because what you don't want is to organize an elaborate key and encryption setup, and then to turn around and have it conflict with others when you're trying to work together. So that's what this document was made for, and the state has done a fantastic job with trying to manage this. So please reach out if you have questions with that. All right, we're going to talk about radio functions. So the most common radios out there, and kind of how they work, and some do's and don'ts with them. So the big talk on the street here, VIPER P25 Phase 2 is coming in 2025, and we have to replace our radios, and we've been talking about that for a few years now. So that is true. In 2025, we are planning the switch, and this increases the capacity and capability of the system, And the older Astro 25, which is the XTS and XTL platform, will be the ones that are no longer serviceable and usable past 2025. So we've been doing our best to get agencies to try to plan and replace these radios. The radios still will work up till 2025, no problem. You can't add any new ones onto the system, but they will continue to work. So we did include the XTS XTL summary in this presentation because we still feel 3 years of training is still valuable before they are no longer usable on the system. If you want more info, you can find out here about phase 2. There's a picture on the right, and this is basically right now when we talk, we use one channel here. Okay, when we get to TDMA, it divides that into 2, and it divides them into slots. So essentially, this one tunnel here that used to be only one channel, now it turns it into 2. So this is an independent conversation from this one, and it bursts back and forth. So that's to the end user, you won't notice a difference, but to the system administrators and the technology, that's it's a big difference. So we double our capacity in the system. All right, some real basics. With a portable radio or even a antenna that's on a car, a vehicle, any type of equipment. For the most part, they're omnidirectional antennas. So here we have a portable radio and the antenna is pointed straight up. It's important to know that the strongest part of the radiating signal from this equipment is perpendicular to the antenna. So if the antenna is pointed straight up, the maximum amount of signal is radiated perfectly sideways. When you'll see folks, they'll tilt their antenna 45 degrees. They may even tilt it sideways. A lot of times that's why they're having communication difficulties. So this antenna in a vertical format is how that is designed to work. The weakest area is directly overhead. If I was trying to communicate with a helicopter that was 2,000 feet above me, would probably be the only time that I would want to tilt my antenna or the radio to use it. So keep that radio antenna pointed straight up. All right, so let's look at the XTS platform, and this is an example of a 5000 and also a 2500 here on the right. And we're just going to run through what the basic parts of the radio are. So looking at the front, we've got a speaker and a microphone up in the front, and this is our front display, and we have soft buttons on the front. They could be programmed for a variety of things, and we have a home button. That's what this little house looks like. All right, so looking at the side of the radio, we have a top side button. Sometimes they're purple, sometimes black. We have a push to talk button, okay, which is usually the biggest button on the side, and then we have some other side buttons. Note that the push to talk button is the only button that we can't change the programming of. So all of these buttons can be agency specific on how they're programmed. On the top of the radio, we have a channel knob, volume knob. Correction, this is the volume knob, and we have a channel knob here, and then we have an ABC switch. It's usually a little thumb notch that's right here that you can switch this to A, B, or C, and then we have an antenna, and also for the most part, always programmed as emergency, but sometimes folks program it to do other tasks, but it is essentially the emergency button. Looking at the front display, it's the same on 5000s or 2500s. We have signal strength. This is one we definitely want to know is a direct and talk around symbol. This is a little arrow. Those that have encryption, we have a secure symbol, means we're in a secure mode. And then we have a scan symbol. And we have a view program symbol up here, and of course battery. Those are the most common icons on a display. Alright, so some other things. To select a zone, so here we see the average screen, and we have a zone name and we have a channel name. And you can go back and look at some of these items later, but it all depends upon how the radio is programmed. So we're kind of giving you some general ideas, but in this case, this soft button is the zone button, and we hit that, and then all of a sudden now we can use the arrow button and go left and right and pick the desired zone we want. And then here we have, this is of course a little different setup now. They have this button now set up as the channel button. For the most part, most people rotate their channel knob at the top, and that actually changes their channel. You can actually do that many different ways, but that is another example. Okay, so using your soft buttons, your home button, and your menu scroll left or right is probably the most important takeaways on having to navigate through. Alright, so XTS channel change. So like I said, we use the top knob most of the time. It's common in a lot of radios that on especially day-to-day operation zones, the first channel and last channel sometimes are the same. So if you have a dispatch that's on channel 1, a lot of times people put that on channel 16. Whether you're a fireman in a building and you don't know, you go all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and you're going to be on what you need to. Same thing with law enforcement. So it really depends how that's set up. Generally, we talked about portable radios are designed in zones, which 16 channels. All right, there is a little light on the top, and that little light means different things. So it can be red or green, but a lot of times we're looking for this red light. That means we're transmitting. The channel could be busy, or it will light when we have a low battery status. When we first turn the radio on, we'll get a green LED a lot of times, which is doing a self-test. Alright, antenna. I guess the biggest thing, don't carry the radio by the antenna. That's the first rule. But if you do want to take the antenna off, always turn the radio off, and of course unscrew the antenna like anything else counterclockwise, and you can remove it, and you do the opposite to put it back on. This is a SMA normal polarity style connector. You can connect in a external antenna if you desire. The big thing here, do not over tighten. So tighten it where it's snug, but don't ratchet the thing down. You can have the tendency to strip out this connection, which will require a repair. Alright, the battery. Sometimes there's some confusions with the battery. The biggest thing is there's two little side clips. Both of those have to be pressed down in order to release the battery. And that battery will not come off until those side clips are released. And if you only do one, it's not going to come off. So ensure you push those down, and then the battery will fold out and come right out. Vice versa, when you're putting that battery in, you want to make sure you hear the two clicks of those little tabs locking into place, and you know the radio is the battery is locked. And you always want to have the radio off, obviously, when you're putting the battery in or out. All right, accessory connector. You'll find these dust covers on the radios a lot, especially when they when they first come in. And if you don't have a microphone on them, they're good to keep on. But if you don't, then most of the time they get lost. So you really can do it either way. I prefer from the top is to just take a small little screwdriver and just pry that cover off, and that's how you get it off, and it'll click right back on. All right, the belt clip. This is pretty simple for the batteries. These have a tendency to break sometimes, but you could take a small screwdriver and just this little tab that you see right here, push on the tab, and this will slide right out. All right, so with a volume knob, this is I hate to say it's really basic, but it's you turn it clockwise to increase the volume, and obviously counterclockwise to turn down the volume and to turn the radio off. All right, on the XTS 5000, we have a two-position concentric switch, and what you see in that is right here, and that generally is designed for clear and secure operations. So if you want to switch to encrypted, you would hit that rocker, and here's your symbols. Remember, we discussed it earlier on the screen. There's your symbols, and then we have a three-position ABC switch as well. And then on the 2500, that ABC is a little different. It's that concentric that's built in underneath the channel knob. Okay, so still pretty similar. All right, the orange button most often is designed as a panic or emergency alarm. This can be set in a variety of ways. The biggest takeaway it's important to understand if you do have these emergency alarms set is that you understand what occurs when you press it. So some things, nothing will occur, it doesn't go anywhere, but it does affect how the radio system is functioning, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But the other one is some panic buttons are designed where a console, where it'll go and alarm a console, and a dispatcher will get that information, and then somebody's coming to look and check on you. So it's very important to not only know what this button does, but know if it goes off what to do. And it does have some impact on the system as well. So the important thing is not to ignore. If you have an emergency alarm go off, do not ignore it. It needs to be addressed, and it's up to your local agency on how those alarms are set, on what your process is. All right, so the ABC switch here on the 2500, this can be set all different things. So there's really no standard right now across the state. It's really up to the agency on how they design to program that. So the best advice here is consult your local programming parameters for what that actual use is and how it's programmed. All right, microphone and speaker. General rules of thumb is hold the radio a few inches away from your face when speaking in a normal, clear voice. Remember, this radio does not translate. If it hears garbage coming into it, a lot of times it will produce garbage out the other end. So do not poke holes in the speaker grill. If it gets full of stuff, you have a tendency you can punch through membranes in the speaker material. Avoid getting the radio wet. If it does, shake the radio to remove the water out, and through the microphone port, and follow manufacturer's recommendations. Okay, the four-way navigation button, we call it the arrow button. We talked about that's how you move through the screen icons by pressing the right and left button, and we use that in conjunction with the soft keys and the home button. All right, we're going to talk about the mobile, the XTL mobile real quick, and this should go fairly quickly. Right now there's no current standard on how the buttons or menus are programmed in radios. So what you see, what we're going to cover, it can be very different from agency to agency. But there are some buttons that remain constant, which the volume, which is all the way in the left, and of course the channel knob on the right, for the most part, remains constant. So here's a bigger picture of that. So looking at the front of the screen, we have a volume. We have this is where the microphone connects. We have a home button, which you see the little house symbol. Might be hard to see. We have backlight, on, off, and so those are pretty static. Where we do get into the differences are the soft keys. So here, anything that's programmed in the way the soft keys work can be different from agency to agency. And of course, just like the XTS 2500, we have a menu button. We can scroll left or right, channel, and emergency. If you notice, all the icons up here in the top part, for the most part, they're the same as they are on the portable radios. All right, Apex platform. We'll go through here real quick. This is the newer radio. That if you don't have, this is what replaces the older Astro 25 series. And here's a picture of the front of the radio and the basic components. So we have the antenna, we have a channel knob, we have a microphone, which is this little tiny spot right there. And we have the four-way navigation button, very similar to the XTS. And we have a home button, and we have the soft keys. And of course we have the display. We have a 3-position switch up here and a volume button. All right, so here's an example of the buttons looking at the other side of the radio. Here you can see the main battery. Speaker on this side is in this grill. Microphone. We have a top display, and here's your side buttons. Most of the time, I'd say on 90% of the radios, the top button is usually a site display search, and that will tell you what radio site you're on, or if you want to try to force it to another radio site, that is the command that we want to use. So most of the time it's that. Push to talk button, that's constant, that doesn't change. And then the other 2 side buttons are user defined. The battery latch, a little different. It's down here at the bottom. Same thing, 2 tabs on either side. Okay, looking at the top of the radio, we have the volume 3-position switch. We have a channel knob. We have an emergency button, antenna, and here we have a very little tiny 2-position switch, which almost goes back to the 5000. We have a clear and secure mode there. And if you notice, this is the XE version radio, so the buttons are a little bit bigger, and this is really designed for firefighting, and somebody that has gloves on can look at that radio and feel it a little bit better. Okay, the battery, same thing. Want to make sure that the radio's turned off when we're swapping batteries. And here we see the little battery latch on this side. There's one on the other side. We want to squeeze those, and the battery will slide right out. And same thing when we put it back in. We want to hear those 2 clicks of the battery latch locking in place. Same thing with the antenna. we don't want to over tighten this. Use only the supplied antenna that comes specified for that radio. You know, it does make a difference, the antenna that you use, as far as length and as far as the band. Don't just pick an antenna up and put it on a radio. It very well may not work. Alright, the accessory connector, a little bit different. This one has a thumb screw, and basically all we want to do is unscrew the thumb screw, and there's a little latch, and that dust cover comes right off. This is something that you want to inspect pretty regularly. Make sure that when there's water getting in or moisture to these contacts, that it doesn't corrode this area. You know, follow the manufacturer's recommendations, but we want to make sure these contacts are clean if you're using external accessories. Alright, carry holster. You can carry these radios in a variety of ways. Here's just a picture of the one sliding carry holster. Very simple. Radio slides down in it. You just push it up and it comes right out. There are multiple ways to carry these radios, though. And of course, the on-off button. Clockwise increases the volume, counterclockwise turns it down, and turns the radio off. And we talked about the push to talk button. One thing here is with the Bluetooth functionality of the Apex line, this little blue dot that you see right here, that's the Bluetooth pairing dot. So if you have Bluetooth accessories, basically you touch the two devices together, blue dot to blue dot, and that will initiate the pairing sequence for the radio and accessory. Really cool about Apex radio, you can use either side of the radio, so there is a microphone on front or back, and it senses which direction the sound is coming from. And same thing with a mic, and you could see where the speakers are on the mic, or where the mic is actually on the front of the speaker mic. We call that a RSM, or remote speaker mic. Yeah, so the buttons, home button, pretty standard, but the menu buttons, like I said, can all be different depending upon how the agency set those up. And here it's just these are all Apex radios on the left hand side, model 1, 2, 3, and then we have the Apex XE 1, 2, and 3. So we've got lots of different flavors here on radios. Same technology, just a little bit different features. Alright, so some of the icons you see on an Apex radio, a little bit different. We have battery icons, transmitting, receiving, receive signal strength indicator, what we call RSSI, and the direct symbol. Remember we talked about an arrow, that has pretty much stayed the same. We have a power level, scan, and you could take scanning pretty deep into some other features with priority. That will actually show you some more on that as well. That's another presentation outside of this one. Some additional icons, the secure symbol we talked about. This one here is GPS, if you're using the GPS function. View program mode, that is pretty much when we're in scan mode, adjusting the scan list. And Bluetooth on, Wi-Fi, of course, monitor, scan, and so just gives you a different idea of what those icons look like. Alright, so the LED at the top, this is a little bit better of a guidance on what that LED can do. So solid red, and you can look here, but the biggest things we're looking for is solid red, pretty much we are transmitting, and solid yellow when we're in the conventional mode means the channel is busy, And those are the big ones, the most common. You'll also notice when you first fire the radio up, you'll see a very quick red flash. And that is your radio doing a handshake with the system and attempting to affiliate. And that's an important one that us as radio techs look to make sure that that's occurring when the radio turns on. All right, some other things you may see on the screen with Apex. If you're out of range, which what that means is whatever system that you're trying to connect to, it means the radio is not hearing it. So you'll get a red out of range indicator, and a lot of times you'll get a audio alert to that as well. Emergency, you will get a orange bar that goes across the screen, and it'll show emergency, and that is indicating the radio is in emergency mode. All right, we'll talk about chargers real quick. A lot of questions come up about chargers. This is an Impress charger for Apex radios, and they're using Impress batteries. So a lot of folks say, hey, can I leave a radio in the charger? Should I take it out? Should I recycle the charge on it? What do I need to do? So the answer is it doesn't hurt to leave the radio in the charger, but it should not be on. The other thing is the charger will keep that battery maintained, but there's a certain cycle that it wants to recondition the battery. So if you were to take that radio out, put it back in, it wants to automatically recondition it after a certain period of time. And it's designed that way to reduce the amount of memory and keep the battery in good functioning conditions. So we'll look a little bit harder here, and here are your indicators. So we see, so all the different colors here. We have single, flash green, steady red, flash green, steady green. This is what everything means for the most part. And the other one is, we say yellow, but it's really, I would say amber. That is in the reconditioned state. So if you get a flash fast red, that usually means the battery is bad. Steady red is it's in charge mode. So these are the most common colors with the charge status. All right, radio charging tips. You can disconnect the batteries from the radio and just put in the charger. Obviously turn the radio off and make sure it's locked into the charger. And the colors on the bank charger should be the same as individual chargers. If you do get that red-green flash, it usually means it just alternates red-green. It means the battery's reached the 50% level, and it's time for you to reconsider, probably replacing or planning for that eventually. All right, so the Apex Mobile, this is fairly short. This is the new head for the Apex Mobile. They changed that out within the last year or so from the 05. I believe this is the E5 now. And here's all your buttons. It's pretty much all the same. We have our menu. Let's see, we got power, mic, volume. This is our dimmer button. And power correction. This is it's a P button. I'm assuming that could be priority. It probably could set this to different types of features depending upon what your agency wants. We have a menu of soft keys that are down here, all programmable with how you desire them to be. And we have a channel knob And here's our little Bluetooth pairing, so that's new from the older radios. And of course, emergency and home. Remember, the home button used to be over here. So there's your home button. And here's a look at the screen. Same thing, you know, as a lot of the other radios. We have our soft menu key items here, our talk group, our zone, and then here is our signal level up here at the top. Here's the full DTMF microphone that can be used on the older or the new mobiles. And here's all the buttons on it. So obviously the push to talk, we have a menu button, OK, cancel, home, and then we have some accessory buttons here on the side. So those all can be programmed as well. All right, so the LED on the E5 head, this is kind of what your LED menu looks like. Depends on what the radio is doing. And you can take a look, but the biggest ones is red for transmitting, and that's the biggest. And of course, yellow in conventional mode, or if it's in secure mode. A little bit different on the screen, so it's a little more pronounced. If you get it out of range, the entire screen and the backlights of the buttons will turn red. And so if you're in this, we'll talk about, you know, your pace plan or what your backup plan is. If this is unexpected for you and all of a sudden something has failed, you know, so we'll talk more about that. But it's definitely more visible than the older versions. All right, so for the healthcare and the hospital side, and even some of the other agencies, public health, a lot of times they will use desk sets, and here's a MCD 5000. This really is an extension of that mobile radio we just talked about, and it provides a desk, almost telephone style interface, and this is pretty common across all the hospitals and other agencies. So when you see these, even though it looks like a telephone, it actually is a radio, and it actually, here's your push to talk button. You could pick the handset up and talk on it as well. You know, here's your soft keys. So really it's the same thing, it's just in a different package. All right, so here's some important things, and this is in previous trainings, this has always been lacking, is some of the most important tones that we want to listen to. So here we have a talk permit tone. This is what it sounds like. Okay, so what that is basically you have keyed the radio and you've done a handshake with the system. The system says, I know you, you're good, and you can talk there. And so it's important to know anything you say before that talk permit tone is completed, nobody will hear. So wait for that tone to complete before you say your transmission. All right, so here is a denial or a prohibit, or what we call a bonk. Okay, so pretty explanatory why they call it a bonk. But what that means is no, you don't have you either cannot hit the system, cannot hear the system, or the system is telling you no, you don't have permission. And we have a system busy. Yeah, and what that means, so we're going to talk more about that. That's pretty important. We want you to know what to do if you ever hear that. It should be very rare. But anything you see here with a star are the most common sounds, what we call the beeps, the sweeps, and the creeps. It's the button press, low battery, out of range, prohibit, system busy, and talk permit. Those are the most common tones. And here's a list, and you can go back afterwards and look at some of these. These are some of the different types of tones and what the radio is actually trying to tell you. That is probably more time than we want to kind of devote to that right this second, but you can go back and look at that. Usage and best practices. So this is really where we want to drive home the most common things you need to know about a radio. So obviously, how do we use a radio? We turn it on, we select a desired channel, the talk group, and when it comes time to talk, we hit the transmit button and we wait for that talk permit tone before we speak. Cool, calm, collected voice into the radio. That's what we want. We don't want garbage. Speak a few inches away with a normal voice level. And remove the radio from your hip pockets, turnout pockets if you're having difficulty communicating. Okay, so, and we'll talk about, a radio right next to your body. Your body acts as a very big signal blocker for this antenna. So especially firefighters, law enforcement that may have the radio on their duty belt and they're sitting in the car trying to talk on the radio, very difficult. Hold the radio upright as much as you can. Do not put the radio at an angle, and do not carry the radio by the antenna. All right, so here's one recommendation. So for the firefighting world, trying to put this underneath of your PPE, your turnout, obviously gets pretty difficult, and one, you can't get to it. But the biggest thing here we want to notice the antenna is kind of external and almost canted away from the body. And so the further you can get a radio away from your body, the best signal you're going to have. So your body acts like a big shield. And here's just some differences to give you an example of if, and this was a study done by I believe folks in Fairfax, it's in the references. But here's an example of coverage of a radio transmitting in the open. And here is the same radio in the picture that we just saw with the radio outside of the firefighting gear. And now here's the coverage with that same firefighter crawling with the radio exposed. And then here's the coverage with the radio in the pocket, in his turnout pocket while crawling. So can you see the difference? So if you are calling a mayday or you need to share important information, can you see the performance change from this to this? So big difference on how you carry your radio and the performance it has. And this is just another, this gives on the technical side a loss in how many dB. So, this goes from wearing a shoulder strap and outside of the coat all the way down to radio in the coat pocket crawling. And you can see the difference on how much loss there is. It's pretty amazing. All right, so general rules of thumb with difficulty. If you do have difficulty, alert whatever team that's with you, the incident commander, dispatch if you're able to. Ensure the radio is pointing directly up to ensure maximum horizontal signal. Switch to direct or simplex channels if that's not resolved. And if that doesn't work, switch to a whole different means of communicating if possible. So whether it's a different band, backup, satellite. If you have interference, you may want to shield the radio, away from interference. Find higher ground, and we always say elevate your radio like the Statue of Liberty. We joke sometimes, but if you have to take that radio and hold it up, almost like the Statue of Liberty with a torch, that may benefit you greatly if you're having difficulty. All right, this is a class all in itself. We'll talk about PACE planning, and what that stands for is your primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency solutions to a problem. So here we're going to specifically relate it to communications. So normally we're in this primary mode up here, which is our normal day-to-day operations. It's what we use every day. And as we progress down this list, things go from good to bad. And so when primary doesn't work, what's our first backup? Okay, and that could be many things depending upon where you're at. And then if that fails, what's our contingency? So what's our plan C? And then finally, what's our plan D? As a last resort, what are we going to do? So reality is, if you handle almost any problem and have a PACE algorithm, you'll be pretty successful. So it's good for your agency to work on a PACE plan for communications. If something fails, what's plan A, B, and C? And it's important, this is not a frequency or channel plan, but rather a plan to switch to other types of systems and methods of communicating. That's what it is. Radio interference, if you're interested, SAFECOM has put out a book on radio interference. Here's the link to it. We'll provide this when we publish the training, and you can download that at your convenience. All right, so some of the big need-to-know items. So if you experience this sound, I'll go back, sorry about that. If you experience this sound, okay, that sound again is a busy. Okay, real quick summary on what happens. What that is basically the radio site that you're connected to. All of the resources at that site are busy. Everybody's talking on something, and there's not a radio for you to talk on. That's not a huge deal. It's very rare that this happens, but what it does is it puts you in a queue. Okay, so it's almost like they put you in a waiting list. And you sit there in that list until one of those channels comes open, and then all of a sudden your radio will get a talk permit tone, and then you can talk. So if this does occur, it's usually not for long. And the important thing that you need to know is do not keep hitting the transmit button or turning the radio on and off. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the radio, there's nothing wrong with the system. Occasionally that will happen, and you just sit there, allow the radio, just wait. You'll get a talk permit tone, and bam, then you can send your traffic. So the biggest error is people turning the radios off and on thinking there's something wrong with it, and what that does is make that queue longer and longer. So it's very important. I think with VIPER it's less than 1 point something percent that a system busy occurs. So in 20 years of emergency response on the fire side, I've only heard a busy, I think, 2 times. So it's very rare. All right, the next one is site trunking, and we talked about this, but here's what site trunking sounds like. Okay, and your radio will give those little beeps like that, and it will say site trunking, and it's only if it's programmed that way. It'll say site trunking on the screen. And what that means is the radio system, the site is working absolutely fine, but what happened is that big spider web of connectivity that has been knocked off for whatever reason. Maybe somebody has, maybe they're doing maintenance, maybe there's some type of connectivity problem. So what happens there, it's just alerting you saying, hey, radio's working, the site's working fine, but I've lost my connectivity with the rest of the state. So it's just kind of telling you that. Now there are some things that happen during site trunking. So if a dispatch center is only tied into a core connection, you're going to lose that communication with the site that's in site trunking. So that'd be a good time to grab your portable radios or whatever your PACE plan is in the dispatch center and communicate. So usually these site trunking occurrences don't last long, and usually the TSU and the NOC are already aware of it. But after a period of time, if you don't hesitate to contact them and make sure that they're aware. There's some things you can do to force a radio to move to an adjacent site, and that's that site scan button. You can hold that down and try to force it to one of these other sites that are still on the system. That may or may not be possible depending upon the coverage. So, but it's important just to know what to do during site trunking. So that's the summary for that. And if you want more information, feel free to reach out to the points of contact in this training, and we could definitely give you more. This should also be a pretty rare occurrence. All right, other need-to-know item, responsible monitoring. So what happens during a large-scale disaster, everybody wants to hear everything that's going on. So if we have Coast Guard aircraft that are doing hoist and picking people up off Ocracoke Island, everybody wants to listen to the heroes, making saves and getting the job done. The problem is anytime that you're listening from outside that area and you're not involved with that operation, the system is having to send that traffic wherever you are located. So if you are in Greensboro, the radio system is having to route all that traffic from the middle of a disaster all the way to Greensboro. And there's just really no need in that. So having good discipline is essential. And that's where those site busies come in and all that other stuff is when people are not responsible and they're taking up lots of resources for no reason. There's another thing called All Start, which is designed in the system. And the real quick summary of that is when somebody pushes the button, basically the system says, okay, all the sites that currently need that traffic can handle it, and it sends it. And if there's one site that is busy and doesn't have the resources to send it, nobody gets it. So there's a potential that you are impacting a life-saving mission just because you want to listen to the operation. So it's imperative that you don't abuse and you're responsible when you're listening on the radio. Okay, encryption. Like I said earlier, if you want to reach out, the VIPER point of contact as of this presentation is Joe Allison with the TSU, and Tucker Sizemore is the technical point of contact. Their contacts are in this plan. Also, we'll provide them. If you have encryption concerns, feel free to reach out, and they will guide you in the right direction. If you ever are traveling down the road and you need help and you don't have, talk groups, you're like, I don't know how to make, maybe my phone's not working, I need to raise somebody, we have an emergency, and a VIPER radio is all I have. Statewide call is a great example. You should be able to get on and hail whatever county 911 center where you're located. If not, is anybody that can receive your message that you have emergency traffic, and you will get an answer on statewide call. For the most part, all 911 centers should be monitoring this. Radio programming, it's important. Don't try to reprogram your radio. Only authorized people are able to do so. A lot of security things are in place to prevent people from tampering with radios. You can mess a lot of things up on both the radio and the system if you're not familiar. Generally, we tell folks to budget for radio updating every few years. Template updates are always going to happen. It's never set it and forget it. And consider having your radios aligned periodically to ensure the peak performance, especially when we get to TDMA in 2025. All right, so wrapping up, don't forget these important items. 2025 is the upgrade for VIPER, and once that happens, the XTL, XTS radios will no longer work. And as of February 2022, which is currently passed as of this presentation, all radios should have the updated VIPER SOG template in them. If you don't, please do soon, because we want to get this done before we get engaged in widespread disasters. And here's a picture. This is the Coast Guard during Hurricane Florence, we were very busy. But this is a success story of where we have local, state, federal assets all utilizing the same radio system, getting the job done. And this is why we want everybody to be up to date and ensure we perform. All right, just a list of references here. You can look at these. Feel free in your time. These are different things where we've pulled this information from, along with a glossary. What I do want is to display the points of contact. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to Greg Hauser, the Statewide Interoperability Coordinator. He is outstanding and will answer any questions and at least steer you in the right direction. And if there's any questions related to this presentation, you can reach out to myself or the Eastern Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. So we want to thank you for listening, and keep up the great work out there. If you have questions or need assistance, feel free to reach out. But hopefully this provided you a little update for North Carolina VIPER, and we'll continue to do these as we can and provide you the best information. Thank you.